the Grey Hat Beard podcast.
Hello and welcome to Grey Hat Beard Show 48 Part 1. And here we are celebrating Christmas or whichever holidays you may be celebrating where you are. We are Grey Hat Beard, the modern workplace podcast where we talk about all things Microsoft 365. I'm Kevin McDonnell. I'm the Grey of Grey Hat Beards. I'm the head of practice for modern workplace at CPS and Office Apps and Services MVP. I'm also the Grey and not the hat, so I'm going to take that Christmassy hat off for those watching on videos because it's far too hot.
And I was a little bit concerned there because my name is Al Earlier and I am the hat, so the only one allowed to wear a hat on this. And I work for Microsoft as a technology architect.
Hi everyone, my name is Garry. I'm a modern work consultant at Microsoft. I'm also a PMP team member and a maintainer of CLI for Microsoft 365. And I added all that in because last week I had a really short intro, so there you go.
That's much better. We like how that sounds. Do you know, funny, I was going to sort of not bother shaving today. I was like, no, I can't leave the beard and wear a hat. That's just really taking the mix. So. This week we are looking back over the year and just think about the big news that we've shared on Grey Hat Beard and maybe some other things we've picked up along the way. So we're going to pick up some highlights of what we've seen, and in no way is that related to the fact there's very little news come out at all in the last couple of weeks. So there hasn't been much coming out. It's obviously coming into Christmas. We will be looking, I think, in the new year looking forward about the exciting things that are coming up that we can talk about yet, and what we think might happen in the new year as well. But for now, we're going to look back and we're going to kick off. And I think, Al, you said it best in the show notes, was the fact that Microsoft Viva didn't actually exist a year ago. It feels like it's been around for a long time, but the reality is that it's only just gotten general availability at Ignite for all the pillars, and a year ago it wasn't even being talked about. And I think it is one of the biggest things of the year.
I think it is. I mean, to introduce a new brand name like that into the suite of products that some of us have been talking, SharePoint, I think we've probably all been talking about for far too long, far longer than we care to admit to.
And still some people don't put a capital P in there.
Oh, well, and at least Viva doesn't have, it doesn't have the risk that there's going to be a space added in later. Or a capitalization challenge. But no, I think, it was announced in February, and it is already, so embedded into all of the conversations that we have about anything to do with modern work or collaboration. It's really quite exciting to see how it has taken off and to anticipate how it's going to actually build in the new year as well.
And I think it's, there's bits of new technology with it. A lot of it is pulling together things that were already there. But I think what I love about it, and I say there's lots of clients, is it puts the employee at the center. It puts the employee first. It talks about the employee experience. And yes, you could do those things with Teams. Yes, you could do those things with SharePoint. But this is explicitly saying this matters to companies and this makes things better. And it's resonating with people, which is great.
Yeah, I think what I was saying with Viva a year ago didn't kind of, wasn't in our minds, where employee experience wasn't mentioned half as much as what it is now. It is, it is every conversation that we're having, rightly so. It's putting the people who are going to be using these services right at the center of it, and looking at, perspective of how do we make employees' lives easier in a time when, let's face it, it's never been harder for people. A lot of change and turmoil, and I think looking back at the year, we had Steve on, and he was talking about the challenges of as a CEO, how do you connect with your employees? You can't just have those events where you can all get together, have an odd chat in the office and just naturally see people. The whole employee experience concept or approach is just it's so wide and it's top to bottom of a company, right? It's the new hybrid world.
I think it it makes it easier to have a brand like Viva to be able to actually have those conversations with the areas in the business that are really concerned about this, as opposed to IT as well. And I think that's a really important factor to be able to have those non-IT conversations around the employee experience and the benefits of what these tools in this brand can actually bring to an organization.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because if we look at the new things that came from with Viva that we didn't know about before, I think the biggest of those is Viva Learning. That really is a brand new piece. I have to admit, I've been getting hands on with it in the last few weeks, and when I first saw it, I was kind of like, this is going to be useful for people who've got lots of different learning providers, but others it's not so. I think the fact that they've put that SharePoint content in the version that's included with your license means you can put your content out there. At CPS, we put a lot of our compliance training. Harj does some great work putting together training, puts it as PowerPoint, and then he has to go and track, puts out Microsoft Form. We're just moving that into Viva Learning, and he can actually, people can see it embedded there. It's not about trying to find that email. It's having that single place on there. So I'm warming to it a lot more than I thought. And I think what's also interesting is, I made a note, the fact that the preview went out for that, and they had to close it early for new people coming in because there was such demands for it. And I think, I might be wrong, but I think the demand for Viva has taken Microsoft by surprise. I think they're really enjoying having a hit on the right moment for this one. And exactly as you were saying, Garry, it is the time for this employee experience where it's been harder for everyone, and they've hit the right thing with this. And we have two people in the virtual room here who've picked up on one of the other kind of big topics related to Viva, which is the Great Resignation this year. The number of people that have changed roles, looking for new roles, have deserted poor colleagues who've been left behind to pick up the mess on there.
Do you hear that violin?
I couldn't find the violin. That
was bigger than I thought.
Don't know about you, Garry. I definitely couldn't find the violin.
But no, joking aside, I think the Great Resignation has been one of the big stories of the year. The sheer volume of people that have moved, and looking at Twitter recently, the number of people that are moving. I saw Tom Arbuthnot. A lot of the Azure dev advocates seem to be shuffling around from Microsoft. There's a lot of people who've left there in the last few months. A lot of people just moving around. It's still going on, and company-wise as well, being bought up.
And I think the other thing about that is, there was an article that Microsoft released around some research they'd done that said, over 50% of people will move if they don't have the hybrid working scenarios that they want, which I guess reinforces, that Great Resignation was a predictor. It was predicted, that actually there was a lot of pent up desire to move, but actually the factors that are driving that are different to any set of factors that have been there in the past, in terms of both bottling it all up until there is, a bit more confidence in the economy and how we're working, but also the fact, making a choice based on, am I going to be able to work from home half the time, all the time? They're completely different factors that people didn't take into account prior to the last 2 years of working at home, in the office, and wherever we might be.
I think some people did, but the options for doing it, there weren't so many companies offering that capability to do it, and now a lot more going, oh, actually, yeah, we can offer that more easily now.
Yeah, I think just that the Great Resignation is every company. There is no company that is not immune to this at all. There are, whether you're big or small, people are leaving for multiple reasons. I mean, we're talking about the research that's been done. There was the whole kind of the paradox of going back into the office, right? Of people saying, yeah, I need to go back into the office because I feel more energized and I'm more productive. And in the same in the same breath, other people are like, no, I don't want to go to the office because I won't be productive, and actually working from home is my productive space. So organizations, again, trying to accommodate for all these changing needs of their employees, which
was Garry frozen there for you as well?
I think he is frozen.
Oh, he was on a great point there as well. But I think while Garry comes back, I think, Al, you hit the nail on the head with the word choice there. It's people want that choice, and that's that ability to not have to do things, to have that option. For me, I'm more productive at home. I will get something done when I'm not being distracted by people. However, I do, and I'm definitely part of that paradox. I love to be in the office and to be able to sort of bounce ideas and collaborate and work on things together. That works better in the office. So to have that choice works a lot better. You are back now, Garry. So.
Lovely. Yeah, so it's like I was saying, it's no one's immune. I mean, personally, I've joined a team which it just keeps getting bigger. It's just more new people arriving into the team as well, and likewise other people moving out and doing different roles. And I think it's that reflection, right? I think you mentioned this actually, Kevin. I remember this of another factor is almost because of the pandemic, we've had less things that we can kind of have in our control, and one of the things that's in our control is the ability to change jobs, as well as the skills gap as well, which there appears to be in the industry. So there's this kind of the market's buoyant. People are then going, I need different things from my workplace, and seeing that there are lots of opportunities out there. So it's a buoyant time in the recruitment market at the moment. I see. So if we add that into the mix as well, that just kind of fuels it even more.
Yeah. What I do think will be interesting, because if we look at the pillars, one of the things about empowering people has been Viva topics, to put in the knowledge so that when you join, you have all that information there. I haven't seen so much interest or investment in that. So I know we'll talk about kind of future thoughts, but next year is going to be very interesting to see, as all these new people have joined and people have moved around, the impact of that churn to many organizations, and how that's going to affect things. As people can kind of get by for a while, but after a bit it's going to be like, well, hang on, we haven't got details, so we don't have plans for this. So my top tip for your budgets: put in time for some knowledge management.
And I think that's not just people moving between organisations. That's people moving to different teams in organisations. It's where those teams are kind of coalescing to say, this team's going to be working primarily in the office. This team's working primarily remotely. We have a shared preference for our way of working as well.
Yeah, so that's the different levels, right? Of different. The local levels and the kind of the global levels of ways of working, and I think we all kind of work in different ways with different teams. So again, that's another complexity, right? To handle. Yeah.
Well, I think the other complexity, and Al, you brought this up, is that with everyone working from home, you've got to change the way you think about your security and your compliance needs from that, and that rise of cybersecurity that you brought up.
I mean, I think that's the start of the pandemic. Security was a nice to have. Now it's far more front and center for every organization, and I think partly it is that we are all working remotely to some extent. We all have a multitude of devices, whether it's multiple corporate devices or multiple personal devices, that we're using in different ways. But also, there are more prominent breaches taking place that are impacting organizations in different ways. So security is by far and away, that it needs to be invested in for every organisation, and every part of an organisation is thinking about it now.
It's fascinating. Garry and I are going to be doing a series of talks at the Microsoft Reactor around open source. And what I was looking at one of the things is, how can you find what the trending repos are? And funnily enough, Log4j and Log4j scanners came up an awful lot at the moment.
Really?
Yeah, so anyone listening who's having a bad Christmas because they're scanning for Log4j stuff, I hope things improve quickly on that one.
Again, I think we have these kind of very high level breaches, right? And I've seen just throughout the year the change in attitudes from customers. Okay, so you may be on projects and security is mentioned, and it is well, maybe it's a nice to have. We can do that later kind of thing. And now it's very much part of the conversations on a regular basis, because one, things like, Log4j just appears and you're kind of, oh, do we need to check and make sure that we're safe and we're working in a way that is secure. But I think that is just, it goes back to what I was saying about that kind of change in shift, that it's not necessarily a nice to have now, it's mandatory, and I think it's taken that time for it to roll through into different areas. So in IT especially, it's always been there, but from the business side, I think there's a lot more awareness, and actually looking at the things that are not necessarily as tangible. It's not necessarily something new. It's there to keep you going and making sure that everything is good for the future. That to me is a big change that I've seen.
I think where you talk about that great resignation exposing vulnerabilities, being it for an organization to be able to overcome those, there's a lot of changes to the way they work that need to be implemented. And Microsoft's demonstrated some of the direction of travel with things like purchasing cloud NOCs for that that cloud entitlement management across multiple clouds, including AWS and GCP. And I think that's kind of we're seeing a lot more of that. Okay, we want a holistic security management tools that will manage everything that we've got, rather than point solutions that will actually manage, well, we're going to manage our security for devices in this space and for other types of devices in this space and for compliance in this way. And I think that's a big directional change to say, we want to see everything together so that we can manage these security events and incidents across all of those.
Yeah, it was interesting. We're talking about brand for Viva, right? If we're in the security space, it's all about Defender.
And I think we've mocked the name changes over the years. We've got some good mileage out of name changes, but I think I've been doing more and more sessions around security, and actually it makes a lot of sense when you're now starting to talk about the brand of Microsoft Defender, because it does then say, well, okay, we've got all of these different things, whether it's M365, whether it's Azure, it all comes together in one conversation quite nicely then.
I'm just thinking back to the Microsoft Reactor, and the one in London has an arcade game in it. Is that not Defender that they have there? There was our first indication. We should have realised that. I never thought about that until now. But a branded game of Defender with all the kind of bugs coming down, there's a Christmas present.
Well, there you go. That sounds like a power app someone might build.
Yeah. Nice.
that is a name change, and I completely get it. I mean, there's been a few stinkers right throughout the year that we've talked about, but that one, from by getting everything under one brand. That becomes easier to bring that to the table when we're having these conversations as well, rather than this kind of maybe not say broken, but appears to be kind of a broken ecosystem. It doesn't feel joined up from the naming point of view, so that makes it harder. That rename is definitely one of the better ones in recent times.
And it's been interesting. A number of clients I've been speaking to, whereas in previous years trying to have that talk about E5 was like, we're not going for that price. Actually, more and more coming to us who've either got E5 or want to for that security, and seeing that the telephony is coming in as a bonus, but really understanding that the value of going for those higher licenses on there. There's still conversation going, that's far too much on there, but I think the value of those is getting bigger and bigger as to what you get within that, and the reduction in time by going for those intelligent ways of kind of picking up the documents, the return on investment for the reduced time you spent trying to build, monitor that, and the reduced risk is massive. So
a lot of benefits.
So moving on to the other big news, I think Al, you summed it up nicely when you talked about virtual conference fatigue, and I for one can say I was absolutely there. The thought of having to sit through another set of sessions online or try and watch them while I was doing something else, and just started the day, I couldn't be bothered. It was the same one. There were so many of them that came through. There were some fantastic events, some really great events, but just sheer number picked through. And then, at least for us in the UK, Comsverse happened, South Coast Summit happened. We got to meet face to face. Sorry, Garry, I know you didn't make it down there, but it was so lovely to see people and just reminded what the community was about. It wasn't just talking one way, it was that two-way conversation, even the odd hug being thrown in there as well.
Oh, you remember when I hugged you, do you? Oh, that's nice.
I wasn't that drunk then.
I think, but you're absolutely right. I think that the speaking, I found myself, presenting at conferences that were online, but not actually sticking around for many of the sessions, maybe one before and one after. And I think it's, we find it in our daily lives. If you're an information worker, online meetings, well, you're not going to be wanting to spend all day in them. And I think that goes for virtual conferences as well. You're not going to spend all day. And it's great that they get recorded, but again, it's just, well, I'm not going to spend lots of time just watching a video screen and watching them because I
wouldn't drift into things that weren't part of my kind of core bubble, as it were, so much when it was online. Whereas, which in some ways it should be easier to, but the reality was in person, I'd probably go, that room's all the way over there, and if I want to get back for this one, I'm going to run out of time. Maybe I'll just pop into this session and saw something that I wouldn't normally have done a lot more, and maybe sort of wandered around and gone, yeah, this feels like it, which didn't do virtually quite so much.
And I think the other thing is, when you go to a large conference, and both Comsverse and South Coast Summits, they've got vendors there as well. They've got sponsors, and it's an opportunity to see, and that actually has been incredibly useful to see what people have going on, because I haven't seen
feel the devices. Brilliant.
And it was, that's been actually really valuable. So I think virtual conferences are great, and it's great that we have those opportunities to share, for people to learn, but in person is still head and shoulders above a virtual event.
I think one of the things I found interesting was Comsverse, where the speakers, you could get a wide range of speakers and they could come and present live at the event on a big screen. As someone who's got a family, I can't go out every weekend. I need to be able to turn down events because I can't go to absolutely everything, much as I'd love to. It's just not reality. So having that option for speakers to be able to speak at more events and be able to present virtually, I thought was very interesting. And I hope that's something that does stick around. Some of that hybrid, some of that ability to do some online, some in person as well. But and again, it comes to what we were talking about earlier, that choice. I think the same thing. Give people the options to do both, because there will be plenty who want to be there in person.
I think with the virtual conferences, I think one thing that I certainly noticed of the change of it was very much, okay, we're just going to take what we've got and put it online. And I think quickly people realized, this is not going to necessarily work. And there was a change, I think, a lot in terms of the sessions that were run. So we started to see a lot more shorter sessions. And obviously, things being recorded and being put online. I think that's been, at the time, it's a lot to take in, but I think what I've found is I've gone back to those certain conferences. So I'll call out Al, the recording you did for Scottish Summit, the to do for your mental health. I picked that up and shared that, and it was it's perfect. So I was able to share with my team, something that had been recorded at a conference that was, earlier on in the year. So having the ability to do that was great. But I think, the change in the way that the conferences were run was definitely needed. I'm thinking back to, we had the PNP conference as well, and the effort, the amount of effort that we had behind the scenes to get that running. That is, and there was only one, because we realised that actually it was too much. It was too much on the individuals to actually set it up, but it was also a lot for the attendees as well, and the fatigue. And I think that the community calls, right, are a great example of something that was pandemic that has just carried on and has actually been really good, because you get a few sessions, you get a good community there, you get that kind of good vibe, but the sessions are short and they're punchy. And I think that's, to help with that element of fatigue. I think that's kind of the approach. And I think the recordings are then put into individual videos. They're short as well, and they're easier to consume. So you don't have that kind of, I'm going to be sat through for a few hours watching these. Which who's got a few hours just to do that? You might have 15 minutes, half an hour to just I'll now go and watch that, and it's much more accessible. So yeah, it's been a big change, good and bad, like you say. But the in-person ones still would like to get to an in-person.
Please, Scottish Summit, please hold on.
I
think
the Scottish Summit.
Yeah, other news. I think the growth of Teams. I can't remember if we predicted this, but we sort of thought it would taper off a little bit and slow down. It hasn't. So this year it's carried on growing, which has been incredible. And some of the numbers that have kind of come through for that are absolutely huge. And yes, we haven't seen that exponential growth so much, but still the growth of Teams has come in there. I think we've seen some interesting things with Teams Personal and Windows 11. Interesting being the diplomatic words for that one, which I think has come through. I think the interesting bit I've seen kind of connected with Teams, and Al, you brought this up, and to me was that the kind of Power Platform world in Teams, which if we look at Dataverse for Teams, I think end of 2020, I certainly thought that was going to be the massive thing for 2021. Both of those have kind of happened and they're there, but they kind of feel part of the furniture. And I think it's still big, but it's quietly big. It's just everyone's doing it, which has happened quicker than I thought.
I think that the uptick in Teams usage has focused people in different ways, and I think where we were talking about Dataverse for Teams, and I remember being really excited about Dataverse for Teams and being able to build Power Platform solutions in Teams, and the licensing was different and lots of potential. And then we've seen a lot of organizations just move over to Teams just as a life-saving move rather than as a increase in productivity or changes to the way they're working. And that's kind of almost diverted their focus. So they're not focusing on, well, actually, how can we use Teams more effectively or to change the way we work? It's more, well, how can we just carry on working? And I think, I speak to a lot of different organizations. Some have moved over primarily for communications. Some have moved over because we need to have a way to collaborate on content, but very few have moved over because there's a lot of opportunity to change the way they work. It's more, okay, I need to carry on working. And I think next year, I see a lot of clients who have made that move, and it's been remarkably successful for a lot of organizations, but they are now looking at that kind of like, okay, well, we've flipped the switch, but now how do we enable people to work more effectively? How do we enable them to leverage the capabilities more?
I disagree a little bit, because I'm seeing a lot of organizations who are just doing Power Apps and just creating things. It isn't a big thing. It just feels natural to them, and they're making possibly not the kind of massive organizational shift, as you say. It's not that driver to using Teams, but there are pockets within organizations who are doing some fantastic work with Power Apps, and it's normal. You can do it. It's one of those things that's just there, and I think I like it that way, actually. I don't think it needs to always be that massive transformational shift. Where you get the interesting thing is bubbling up from the bottom, is people being able to get hands on, being able to do things that are connected to what they do. I always say this, it's what got me into SharePoint, was the ability to put into the hands of people who needed it the capabilities to do that. And that is what I love about technology. It's not about me being able to deliver something for other people. It's enabling them to get things that they need themselves without having to spend hours explaining to me what their day job is, what their day-to-day process is, and then I have to try and understand that and put that back. Yep, that will still happen. There's still going to be elements of that, but the more they can do themselves, the better. And I think that feels what is happening with the Power Platform. It's absolutely not going away. It's becoming part of the furniture. It's your trusty, your nice new shiny sofa that you've got that maybe a year down the line, it's just you kind of slump back under your blanket with a tin of Heroes and enjoy it. And that's what I feel Power Platform's got at the moment.
Yeah, it's just become it's there. Just if you need an interface, quick and easy, get Power Apps in there. If you need some any automation, Power Automate. You need to report, Power BI. It's just there, and I think again, it's just much more accessible to everyone. But I think it becomes a maturity thing, right? And that's it. I think I think you hit the nail on the head there of the Teams has been a very tactical kind of implementation at times, just because of the nature of what organizations have had to deal with. And letting the dust settle a bit to go, what other things are around there? And like you say, Kev, you're kind of putting technology in the hands of people for them to make their lives easier. When people start to look around and go, oh well, what have we got with 365 and Teams as opposed to what I had in the past, and that's the beauty of it, right? Then you start to see that natural kind of take up things where, like we've seen with the Center of Excellence, to almost encourage that as well within organizations, rather than going with the let's lock everything down approach, and then you have to request, oh, why do you need this, and it just becomes very restrictive.
I think will be big next year.
I think that's it. That governance will be big, but those organizations that have flicked the switch to turn on Teams, they will have some users who are adventurous. They're going to press that automate button. All right, what does this actually do? But they're also going to have a lot of people who are just going to sit there and go, well, I'm doing what I've been told to do and the way I've been told to do it, and if I haven't been told how to do it, I'm just going to muddle through. And I think that's where there's a lot of potential for the coming year for changing the way people use things, and just educating, those Center of Excellence, as you say, Gary, that's going to be massive coming up, how you govern, but also how you educate and how you, let people know that actually there are these tools out there and they can use them, and they can.
I'm going to hold you off because this is looking ahead to next year, and that's not this show. We're looking back. None of that forward-looking stuff going on here.
Oh, sorry, I'll turn around.
One last thing on that side. I think that maybe not surprised me, but encouraged me, is the kind of steady momentum of SharePoint as well. New things coming, like the collapsible sections. There's just been a steady stream, and I think everyone's always like, SharePoint's dead, SharePoint's going to die, it's all about Teams. But it's been a lovely momentum with new stuff that's been powering out of the box intranets, people being able to get so much more with what you can get by default. And I think Viva Connections has probably had a big push in that Viva Connections been able to nail that. But this I'm going to call out John Wynn, Tony Pounder, James Molyneux, Alex Clark have been just having some fantastic Twitter conversations throughout the year on kind of new things, wanting to get what's coming through, playing around with that. James Molyneux certainly has been putting some great posts out on the kind of new functionality, because there's been such a steady stream of nice things that come through. If you look back at those, look at where SharePoint was and where it's changed over year, that there's been quite a lot of change, and it's good to see.
The old workhorse, right? Is SharePoint. I think it's the backbone, right? A lot of things sit on top of SharePoint, and I think there was the whole. We started to see more of a move away from the classic kind of elements and functionality, and bringing that modern experience to the fore as a default as well. So is
that experience still called modern? It feels like we've been talking about it for a long time as the modern experience, the
fresh experience, the fluent, maybe let's call it that. But it's it's very easy to. It doesn't get talked about in kind of like the big announcements, I don't think. But over the period of the year, there's been so many smaller improvements, and I think it's that maturity again of that. We've had the modern intranets, and there's been gaps. I think everyone knows that, but slowly those are starting to be kind of filled in as. Obviously, more companies take up moving from their old intranets to now the modern intranets, getting the benefits.
Also, there's new features in there. It's not just the things from Classic that we didn't have before. There's kind of newer stuff as well. It feels like this year has been the first year that it hasn't just been that, we had that in Classic. We've got it modern. There's still a few that come through, like the content types and stuff like that. But it's it feels like there's newer stuff which has been really good.
I agree. I think it's the emperor's new clothes kind of approach, isn't it? Where it's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you've given us what we had before, kind of thing. But yeah, you're right, and it's great to see that come into teams as well and be more of a joined up experience. Like, Viva Connections is a perfect example. But being able to just create those Teams apps and having the content in SharePoint and just surface that up, it's become a lot more seamless. It doesn't necessarily feel like, oh, this is a SharePoint page in a tab. It's more joined up with the the context that we've now got between Teams and SharePoint, where I think previously, maybe at the start of the year, they still felt pretty separate. But those gaps are slowly being filled. But it's good. Yeah, SharePoint's here to stay, right?
Absolutely. Other nice new things that came out through the year, and this was one of my favourite, and that is the GitHub Copilot. I think, Gary, you said we should talk about Codespace as well. I think that kind of got announced a bit before, but it's kind of landed properly this year. But Copilot to me just looks incredible. Still not on the pilot for it, but looking forward to that.
It's magic, and it's just unreal that you can even just write a comment and the code will appear, and not just one bit of code. It'll be different versions as well that you can cycle through, and it might not be 100% perfect, but from a developer standpoint of getting started, sometimes you have that, I need to do this, I need to achieve, this is my outcome, how do I get there? Just type in a comment and the code appears, and you're instantly straight into the code, and you can you can start building. From a developer velocity point of view, that is huge. Like, productivity using that tool will be massive, and it'll only get better. And I keep seeing people every so often are just like, I've just used Copilot again. I'm just amazed at what it can do, and it happens on a regular basis. This isn't just like sound bites, and I think as more people start to use GitHub, especially in the enterprises, we're going to really start to see, I think, like what we've seen about employee experience, we're going to start to see a lot more about developer experience and developer velocity, and really focusing on how development teams can be much more productive by using these tools that are starting to come out. So really exciting, especially with someone who's sat in GitHub on the spare time. It's really good to see.
I might even let me do some coding if it will actually tell me
what's
whoa. Don't go that far. It's better than copy and pasting from Stack Overflow.
I haven't done that for a very long time, Garry. It's all right. I'm not that low yet.
Whoa, what do you mean that low? I was doing that. I think I absolutely agree, Garry. I think it's really exciting. Funny, as you were talking, I was like, I wonder where I am in the queue. Looked like apparently I hadn't signed up for the wait list yet, which I'm sure I did, but that's a little bit.
Maybe they've just removed you.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but not enough GitHub action, obviously. I think if I look back at kind of interesting for this show, I kind of look back at all our news and things we've shared on the show notes, and kind of things I've forgotten about a little bit, which were interesting. So one, I think there was the whole discussion around Microsoft and Discord. Completely forgotten that Microsoft's talking about them. That obviously all collapsed and went over to Sony. I haven't heard much more of it there, but obviously slightly out of my bubble, so maybe news has come up they haven't heard about on there. I think the other quiet one that's it is the quiet death of i11. Feels like it's finally there. I mean, it really felt like it was quiet celebration.
There was I think a lot of cheers when we got to. Was it? I'm trying to think of the date now. It seemed to be kind of going on for a while.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
It doesn't feel like, there wasn't a moment. There was a few, the date kind of crept by and everyone, it wasn't the outrage. It wasn't we can't survive.
It's a bit like Y2K, wasn't it?
Yes.
Oh, no, that's a good analogy. The world is going to die. The world is going to end. No, actually, yes, most of us have worked around it and moved over to what we're supposed to be using, not sticking on IE.
And so I think as you come to your end of year celebrations and things like that, just spare a thought for IE and think next year IE11 won't be one of my problems.
For some reason I have the celebrations of the end of Prohibition in my mind. Having a party to end Prohibition.
That sounds like a good excuse. I like that. So we'll just about wrap up there, but almost. I'm going to say 3 more things, and I think we're going to talk about what our favourite shows of the year. So we always do 2 parts. We do the news, and then we have a part 2 on there. So hopefully each of you have remembered what ones we talked about. But I'll kick off, and Garry stole my thunder slightly, because I think my favourite show, and I'm not just saying this because he's the boss of the company, but having Steve Adams on from CPS talking about employee experience from that kind of CEO side and what it meant to organizations, how important it was to consider that employee experience, and having that verdict on it. And I've seen his passion about Viva throughout this year, because he sees the benefit to organizations and how we can help people from that. But it was a really good chat about that, and to me it summed up Viva, because when people first heard about it as a technology, it was kind of, well, a lot of this has already been out there or has been pre-announced. That wasn't the important thing. The important thing was about people and the brand of Viva and what that meant to people. And that has held out through this year. That is the importance of it, and something that's, as technology folk, is easy to forget. So that was definitely my favourite show of the year. Al, what was your highlights?
I really enjoyed the South Coast Summit show, where we had all sorts of people kind of saying what their dream conference would be. I thought we had some great conversations. I know the sound wasn't particularly good, but hey, we'll take that as a lesson. But I think that worked really nicely. And I think,
I would debate that worked really nicely. It was a fantastic show. The fact we couldn't get poor Garry to join us.
Yes,
the sound was awkward, but
we will think about it in a bit more detail next time. But I think the content, and as we said earlier, the fact that there were lots of people there, face to face, it was nice to actually have people sat next to us, hungover, actually speaking. So I think that was a great show.
Yeah, I've definitely been thinking about that, and may invest for South Coast Summit, or see if I can get hold of some devices so we can roam and chat to people as well. I think could be really worthwhile. Garry, what about you?
So I really enjoyed the design thinking chat that we had, something that I know we're all pretty passionate about as well, but I think it's that change in the way that we're having discussions with customers, and taking a different approach, having that really user centric or user focused approach, and just taking a different approach that is not just writing a document and then going, is this what you think? It's getting people involved, getting people engaged, real collaboration as well. Obviously, that's changed with us working remotely, but we're still able to do that pretty effectively. But I think
made different rather than changed.
Made different. But I think that whole concept and thinking, a lot of organizations are thinking, how can we do things differently? How can we get value quicker as well? Reduce the costs and reduce the time that the projects take as well. And I think that whole design thinking approach really does focus people's minds on what are we trying to achieve here. And for me, I'm quite happy it moves the conversation away from technology at that point as well, which is, you bring the technology in to support whatever people need to achieve, and bringing in a lot more of the business elements, understanding their needs and wants, and being able to really hit that quickly is it's what all this is designed to help with. So I'm sure it won't be the last time we talk about design thinking. I'm looking forward to the next one. But that was a favourite. I thought it was a really good discussion.
I found I've had less and less time to kind of listen back to shows because when I speak, and you might notice this, I tend not to think quite so much about it, so I don't always have it sink in. So listening back is often a kind of different view to it. And I did listen back to Design Thinking. I really enjoyed listening to that, actually. Sort of got me thinking about things as well, and how we can do stuff. So no, really good. So that is our wrap up of part 1, and that is the end of our news for the year. We'll be back in January talk about news, but in part 2 we will have I think it's about 16 or 17 guests who are going to come and share their Christmas wishes with us all. So do stick around. That will be out in your feeds probably quicker than a week on there, so have a look for that. Otherwise, thank you very much, and see you in part 2.
Bye.
Bye-bye.